This is The Edge of Excellence, empowering people to shape the future. Let's inspire, innovate, and explore together. Welcome to The Edge of Excellence, the podcast where we explore how leadership, culture, and technology can empower businesses to grow and thrive. Today, we're talking about something universal across industries, world-class service, and specifically what it feels like to people we serve. No matter what field you work in, clients remember how you show up, not just what you deliver.
That's true. I'm Bryon Beilman, and at iuvo, our culture is built on technical excellence and human excellence. And very few people model that balance as well as Bethany Haley. I've seen it in action. I've been with her on customer calls, and she's a perfect guest today. She blends deep expertise with a level of care, communication, and client partnerships that stands out inside and outside of tech. So today we're exploring what it means to create a client experience people remember and how culture is the backbone of world-class service in any industry. Bethany, welcome to the Edge of Excellence.
Thank you so much, Bryon, and thank you, Jess. Happy to be here. It's a pleasure.
Yes, excited to have you on, Beth. So, Beth, when you think about world-class support, what does that mean to you beyond just the technical or task-based work?
Oh, gosh, I would say kind of hitting on what Bryon just mentioned a moment ago with the feeling. I think an important aspect of it is people remember how you made them feel, and that's huge. The experience will stick with you, whether it's a great experience, which of course is the preferred, or if it's negative, that sticks with you too. So of course you definitely strive to have a favorable, pleasant experience, and that expands beyond yourself. That can go to other people, other organizations. It's just kind of a domino effect.
Yeah, I think the domino effect is a perfect example or a perfect way to think about it for sure. So what qualities make clients feel genuinely cared for, regardless of the industry that you might be in?
I think an important piece would be the client feels heard. They want you to understand what their mission is, what they're looking to accomplish, how they want to be supported. Also, in alignment with that, what their concerns are, if they've maybe had negative experiences in the past, how you can prevent that from happening going forward. I think just the client knowing that you're on their side, you're there to advocate for them, support them, help them determine the best path forward, and be their trusted partner along that journey.
Oh, I love that, trusted partner. Bryon, you said a few times that iuvo is a customer service company that happens to do IT consulting. So What does that mean to you?
Yeah, exactly that. I will say that I think so many companies are actually customer service companies. They don't realize it because you got to deal with customers. In the IT industry, it is challenging because there's a lot of people who've really developed their technical skills but haven't developed their personal skills. And there's been I think there's a Saturday Night Live skit where Jimmy Fallon's he's like a rude IT guy, and he's like, "Move, get out of here," and just treating he's obviously much better than them and technology. So that is. Those kind of people that never make it into iuvo. We have this balance, and it is. I'll even say that it's a delicate blend because oftentimes when technology goes awry with people, they can get grumpy, right? And you have to realize it's not about you; it's about what they're experiencing. And I think, and that's one thing I think that Beth does really excellently is kind of be that zen, like, oh, I understand you're frustrated. Let's get to the root of the problem here. And I think in any organization, but especially in IT, I think if you can, I think maybe Beth said that, it's like people feel like they were heard. And then you can say, oh, they care less about really, they care about you acknowledging them and so forth, almost more than they care about you solving the problem at that very second. But they want that solved. But takes some masterful experience to do that right.
No, absolutely. And I think we could probably all think of experiences where that hasn't been the case, where we've been super frustrated or we don't feel heard. Can you, Beth, share a moment when the way you showed up mattered more than the actual fix or solution?
Yes, there are a few examples that pop into mind. I would say it's almost getting ahead of the curve. In this particular instance that I'm thinking of, it was anticipation of something that was going to happen. I know that sounds kind of vague, but and this wasn't a known issue that could have been prevented. It was just kind of more being proactive. But in this particular instance, it was getting ahead of the curve, offering support, kind of rallying up the team and letting the customer know that we're here for you. We've got this, instill that confidence in them that what is going to happen or what could happen, for example, not to worry about that because we have the expertise, we know what to do. We're there with you and, we'll be there for you. And I think that in itself spoke volumes. Just the trust aspect there was huge. And after, everything ultimately went well and things were, great, but it did come up afterwards where there was that gratitude, the thank you, we know you're there for us. This just demonstrated it even further. And I think that just kind of stuck, both with the customer as well as internal. It was just kind of a group effort.
Well, you said something, important word there, I think, is trust, right? And so it takes a little bit to develop trust, and really your actions are the things that develop the trust, right? So we all say, we'll help you. But then when you actually do that and you follow through in a certain way, I think that building trust takes a while to do, and it takes very little to lose trust, for people to lose trust. So yeah, that building that trust on a regular basis is powerful, I think.
And this can be a question to both of you. When you have a new client, so there's no relationship there's no trust built yet between you and the client, what are some things that you can do, or are there, certain habits that you have that you work with a new client on to help build that trust and build that relationship?
I think that's a great question. I'll go ahead and kind of speak to that a little bit. I would say one of the important keys would be to, right off the bat, get to know them as a person, their personality, kind of figure out what makes them tick, what works well, their communication style. Everybody's different. So what may work well for one individual may not be the case for somebody else. So, it's learning to be flexible in that regard and kind of maintain an open mind. I think once you get a good understanding of, the individual's personality, what they're looking to accomplish, kind of find those common denominators, you're able to set the foundation and work from there and build from there. So I think it's important to start small, even though the end goal is much bigger. It's a much bigger vision. Much bigger vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love that you just talked about, their communication style. And I assume even their learning style could come into play here if you have to explain things to them. And I guess I never looked at it from that perspective as far as the technical side of the team and their work with clients needing to have that skill set to be able to kind of really understand and get to know clients in order to have world-class customer service. So that's a very interesting perspective for me as a former teacher, because it's something I thought about all the time in the classroom and absolutely applies to how you can, deliver this in a business.
I just saw this post by Simon Sinek. There's a person I follow, and he was telling this experience of working with an airline and trying to change a flight. And in one experience, they said, "Nope, that's our policy. You can't do it." And so he's like, it was just a bad experience, just a blanket no. And so he asked another airline. They said, you know what, we don't normally do this. Let me try. And they come back. Let me check my manager. Let me try all these different ways. In the end,
Yeah.
they couldn't help him, but he developed this trust and a likeness because they were willing to try something. It wasn't just, nope, sorry, this is our policy.
Right.
So it's kind of how when people are struggling or just need support, it's how you respond to them sometimes can make a big difference too. I think that helps, that communication style you referred to.
Yeah, I thought of the airport when we first started talking about customer service and just how, Bryon, you mentioned when people's IT isn't working, they can get a bit grumpy. I feel like the airport can be really grumpy place.
Yeah. You're
Like,
trying to make your flight or whatever. It could, yeah.
yeah, and I don't envy the folks that have to manage that, but there's absolutely a skill set to the airlines that do this well. And I think that exactly what you're saying, Bryon, and what you've said, Beth, is a big part of that, is just making people feel like you are on their team and making them feel heard and understood, and like you were going to really try to find a resolution for them, even if you can't. I think a lot of people just appreciate feeling like you put some effort behind trying to help them with, whatever their problem may be. Beth, how do you feel preparation, documentation, follow through, like, help shape trust and predictability for clients?
I would say in regards to documentation and preparation, I think having the greater knowledge also sets a good foundation. When you're working with a client, for example, it's not just you, it's the team. And that reflects, everybody is a contributor, and that reflects as a whole to the client. So it is very important for the team to have, knowledge of the client in terms of their business, what their goals are, what they're looking to achieve. And then documentation can play into that if they have, whether it's a specialty application or it's something that's more generally used. It is important for folks to have knowledge as to how to use that, how to troubleshoot it, how does it come into play with the bigger picture. I know I keep going back to bigger picture, but all those gears, they work together, and out comes the final product. So and I think it is important too with the documentation, communication. You're on the same page with each other. The goal would be to kind of make sure that you're addressing something, in a similar fashion, and keep things consistent. Consistency, stability is definitely a big factor in satisfaction.
This goes beyond, for me, goes beyond this concept you just talked about, goes beyond customer service, because I've had the pleasure of using having Beth with me on a sales call as a sales engineer, and nobody comes more prepared than she does. And so there are times when we can't prepare. Like something happens, you got to react. You get a question you didn't expect, but coming in saying, "Oh, I know what we're going to talk. We think we're going to talk about this." Just having as much knowledge you can, and being able to, even if you don't know the answer, say, "I'll get back to you on this and in more detail." So, but I think it goes beyond us. We're a customer service company, but even the sales process, people want to feel comfortable. Like, hey, you know what I'm about. You looked at my industry, or you kind of understand my problem. I think I want to consider using you as a provider.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Beth, you brought up a good point too, in that a lot of times there's a whole team, not just a one-on-one situation with the client. And so making sure that the team is up to speed and that everybody is on the same page, I think is really important to developing this world-class customer service. Do you have any advice or feedback on how you do that with your team? Like, how is there a system or a way to make sure that everybody's on the same page so there is that consistency?
That's a great question. I would say kind of similar to the client themselves. Each team can be a little different, although I would say as a whole, everybody has the same, goal, the same desire to want to help the client.
Right.
But I think in terms of, that vision of success, is just making sure that there's open communication. Trust is huge. It's very important to have a team that you trust, that they're going to do the right thing, get what needs to be done, and make sure that they understand that if there are questions, they're welcome. It's not something to be, scared about asking or nervous about asking. In the end, we're all kind of learning from each other, and certain, personality traits, for example, are very beneficial. Other people can pick up on things that, will work for them in the end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm thinking about experiences I've had. Oftentimes it's on the phone where you're passed from one person to another and you just feel like it's Groundhog's Day. Every person you talk to is like you're starting over with explaining your problem and what's going on. And each conversation you get more and more frustrated and the trust just starts chipping away. And so I think that's, a very important message for listeners to make sure that if you have a team that's going to be interacting with the same client, that you have some sort of streamlined communication within the team to make sure everybody's on the same page. And then as a leader of the team, holding a certain expectation of your team members to make sure that everybody's, delivering consistent quality to the client is also important. I'd be curious, Bryon, if you could share a moment when this like invisible work behind the scenes either prevented an issue or helped a client feel really supported or maybe impressed a client and helped develop and nurture that relationship.
Sure. I think in our industry, we are in charge of people's computers and so forth, and so we put quite a bit of effort into patching and by antivirus and just the basics. Make sure that all the settings are correct. We have these tools and so forth that all give us a central viewpoint. And what that allows us to do is, I think, allows us to focus on what's really important to their business or to them personally, because the basic stuff is taken care of. And so often when I talk to people who are not customers yet, they say, well, how much time are you going to spend on this particular thing that happens all the time for us? I'm like, well, we're not really comfortable. We don't know, because that doesn't happen to our clients because we've taken care of the basics. And what you're getting high level, high tech services from somebody like Beth. And sure, things happen from time to time, but the basics are covered because we've thought ahead of time. This is the best way to get you that support. We're going to take the basic stuff out of the way. So I think that's a general way we do that. There's probably many probably Beth could probably speak to dozens of examples of that, but I do think that we try to focus on what's really important, and that when you get to do that, you have to have the basics covered.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Beth, we talk a lot about culture, on this podcast. I'm curious, and actually, Bryon, your input would be interesting as well. How does team culture influence the quality for services that clients are receiving?
I would say with team culture, again, the trust aspect, the respect aspect. When you're working with good people, as is the case with at iuvo, that extends beyond iuvo and goes into the client relationship. People pick up on that. It's not necessarily something that's verbalized outright, but you can kind of tell, not only with your client work, but even just regular day-to-day interaction, that there's kind of that, that vibe going on. And yeah. I know with the internal teams, for example, everybody has a great relationship. Everybody is focused on teamwork, collaborating, working together for the greater purpose and wanting to make sure that, again, everybody's succeeding. It's not just you, it's everybody. So I think that's a huge part. And I think another great thing about iuvo, for example, is that the open communication. People know when to reach out if they need help with something. There's just that level of support there. which is great. It's encouraged, and that's definitely a unique, rare thing within a company.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bryon, I know you've spoken a lot about the fact that your culture within your business, within your teams, has a huge impact on the quality that's then delivered to the client. So I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
I've seen this in action so many times, is when someone's working on something and people jump in and say, put it on a Slack channel and say, hey, what about this? And like out of the woodwork, like 5 people jump on, let's get on a call and solve this. And it happens so fast. And somebody in there is an expert on something. And so we have this collaborative environment. And so, in general, I think it goes to the core values of the culture of collaboration, of empowerment, of having each other's backs. You know? And so I think, and it happens when you sell a service to somebody, we try not to sell a person, we sell a service. And often we have multiple people per customer so that they have some good coverage and they will get the same experience. So I think that everybody's on a line of service, and then the documentation you asked about earlier, that kind of goes in play. It's all, people know where to access things, and it's very consistent. But I think it's I've seen many examples, not just Beth, but of where people are just, I'm amazed how well they work together. And I did, like as a culture, as a CEO, I didn't say, you guys work together. It was like, you guys just found each other and said, I love working with you. I love working with you. And, and so I swoop in and go, wow, that's amazing. How did that happen?
And Bryon, you mentioned Slack. Beth, can you share with listeners, we are 100% remote company. How do you create that consistency within your team as far as sharing information and communication? Can you talk about some of the tools that you use that maybe others listening could implement in their own business?
Definitely. I think in terms of the communication channels, right, Slack being a big one, Microsoft Teams, I think what personally I find very important isn't necessarily so much the formal check-ins, formal meetings and whatnot. It's those, side kind of check-ins, that communication, checking in with your team, sending a quick note to somebody, hey, how are you? I know with the remote aspect, it makes it a little different than, say, just popping by somebody's desk or somebody's office. But I think having that informal connection is huge. Personally, I feel as though people just enjoy knowing that you care. You may not see them in person daily, but you're still there for them. And I think in terms of, iuvo, for example, the lines are blurred in the sense of it's not just where people are concerned about business only. People are genuinely, concerned and care about the team members individually. I think that, for example, with Slack, with the different channels that we have going, just tapping into people's lives, day-to-day lives, what their interests are, what they're doing. It's to be honest, kind of fascinating to see everybody's, life outside of work, and to have that, knowledge and be able to talk about it definitely allows for some pretty strong bonds to be formed, I think.
How do you differentiate between completing the task and supporting the human behind the task? You talked a little bit about this earlier, how you have to kind of see that there's not just a problem to be solved, but there's a person behind the problem. Do you have suggestions on how to approach that and to do that well? Because it is definitely something you excel at.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I would say for that, again, knowing the individual and kind of their style, how they problem approach, how they communicate, maybe even to a degree what, some of their concerns are. Everybody works differently. Everybody, has their analytical problem-solving approach, but they may just go about it, a little bit different than somebody else. So I think it's understanding, what works best for that individual. I know in terms of what the potential, issue is that might come up, I think what's great about the team is that nobody's afraid to step outside of their comfort zone and tackle something that comes up. It's not where you have to force somebody to, kind of dive in and figure
Right.
out the issue, which is amazing. That's definitely not something that some people are comfortable with. And, even if they may not be, they're still doing it. So that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I'd like to turn this back over to Jess because, like, you also you have a lot of tasks to complete. You have different audiences. Sometimes the audiences are customers. Sometimes they're internal. Your marketing is not just to let the world know about our services, but there is to keep our culture and the communication alive. And so there's humans involved there. Can you elaborate on that from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it may have been you or Jesse had said at one point that my lack of technical knowledge, I'm not a tech expert here, is my superpower. And so it allows me to kind of be a filter because a lot of the people that we communicate with are not technical experts, hence why they're coming to us. And so we want to be able to communicate to that audience. And so I think that naturally I just have a filter for that because I can have a conversation with one of our technical experts and think, what? Help me understand that. And, it allows me to kind of like help walk them through how to break it down to my level of understanding and then allows me to communicate, with others. But as far as tools go, I mean, we are a big HubSpot company. And so HubSpot is a main tool of how I'm communicating with people in the world about iuvo. And it offers a lot of different features that help me do that. We use SharePoint, which is where we, have a lot of our information stored. And that's how I share internally with our teams so that they can find the information that they need to empower them, to empower our clients. Slack obviously is a big component to that. And I am a big fan of chatting and talking versus typing. I'm the same way on the phone, which I feel like is a dying breed, people that like to talk on the phone. So I love jumping on a Teams call. And luckily, my manager, Matt, does not seem to mind that because he and I will often just like call each other and just like have a conversation versus like going back and forth in Slack. But those are some of the key ways that I am like managing the people, whether it's my coworkers or trying to communicate externally to, the outside world about iuvo.
That's great.
I love that.
It's a lot, right? There's a lot of different moving pieces to try to communicate, especially when we are remote. And so being able to have Slack and the Teams meetings so that we can see each other face to face is really helpful. And then obviously we are constantly throwing things on the calendar to get together in person whenever we can as well, which is really helpful as well.
I will say too, in general, that we're a Teams company, but if our customers want to use Zoom or they want to use Google Meet or whatever, like
Right.
we try to meet them where they're at and say, hey, we'll use the tools that you want to use. And if they get on Teams, great. So again, trying to customizing that experience.
Yeah. And I think customization is a huge piece to world-class customer service. If you have that ability within your business, I think that goes a long way. And I think it's one of the differentiators that iuvo brings to the table that makes us, unique and that our clients appreciate about us is that we do meet them where they're at. And I think, Beth, that's something that you do really well, not just from what technical needs do you have, but meeting people where they're at emotionally, meeting people where they're at on their level of understanding of technical, information. So I think that being able to do that no matter the industry you're in is just like you said, like learning the person first in early days of that relationship so that when problems arise, you kind of know how to approach that conversation or that problem. And I imagine, Beth, in your role, you probably deal with clients that are going through some difficult times like layoffs or, they're dealing with really sensitive things that are difficult for us as human beings to deal with. And so you're having to, I'm sure, have these conversations with them about things that you need to assist them with that may not be easy for them to be going through. Do you have any advice on how to like remain professional, but also like support the human in those situations?
That's a great question. I would say for that, personally, I found that a huge part of it is the in-person interaction. There's a lot of value with having that, face-to-face interaction with a client, whether that be, in person on site, hopping on a quick phone call, even just letting them know that you're there for them, the group is there for them. That's a relief in its own. Whether or not they choose to, reach out if they do need anything extra is on them, but they know that you're there if they do need that.
Right.
And I would just say, right, in terms of the individual that you're interacting with, again, knowing what makes them tick, knowing their style, their communication, picking up on those cues are huge. I think once you have an understanding of that, it kind of just goes naturally, and they know what to expect from you, and vice versa. It's not to say that things can't be, adjusted in the sense of maybe down the road something else is needed, support wise, but I think once you have that foundational trust and respect, the world's your oyster, essentially.
Well, this question made me think about something you both said, and that is, there's a term we haven't used yet, but it's kind of used often as trusted advisor. But when a company or a client or even a friend is in a bad situation, they want somebody that they can trust. And when you're like, for example, we've had to either lay off or somebody gets terminated for cause, and IT, they generally have to shut off their access, and you're doing this for somebody who is still a human. And so there's you try to, if we're involved at all, we try to, we have the trust of the company ahead of time, so we know before they do, because that's best practices. But so there's a trust level there. There's treating the situation. Nobody wants to do that, doing that well and stuff like this. We get involved in a lot of those type of situations. We love that, the hiring and the new stuff, and the happy times. We just broke our new sales record, but that's not life, right? It's ups and downs. And so I think having that in mind is being that trusted person. They can whisper in your ear saying, I'm a little worried about this right now. And you say, don't worry, I got your back.
Would you say that there are any small behaviors that help build trust fast in those early days that you could give as advice to listeners?
I would say that setting expectations and coming through, or, basically showing up. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you're, promising this or that, see to it that gets done. That right there is huge, because you want to make sure that the customer knows that you're responsible, that you're, reactive and proactive. But when I say reactive, I just mean that if they ask for something, you get that done. So I would say that those little things are actually in turn quite big things. And then in terms of just the initial aspect of it, I would say just let them know that they're important. You're there for them, and you're essentially a team. You're going to work together and make sure that they have what they need.
Yeah, I think setting expectations is a big part of that. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that that's really important. And sometimes laying out those expectations can be really helpful, because then they're not making assumptions. And it's much easier to meet the expectations when you are laying that out and agreeing on those terms early on in the relationship, I think. So how would you say that you maintain trust when there is a stressful situation or an escalation? So it's like Bryon said, everything's going great. Life is good. The birds are singing. Everybody's happy, but that's not reality. And I'm sure that you've had to deal with some stressful situations or escalations with clients. How do you continue to maintain that trust with them during those situations?
I think, again, the setting expectations, making sure that you're in alignment with what the end goal is. Ultimately, there's a desired outcome from the customer side, also the iuvo side, and working together. And you want to make sure that, you're on that same path. The open communication is key there. also rallying the team. No,
Mm.
the customer, wants to know and should know that you're all there for them. It's a group effort, and I think it's important and letting them know that they're not alone. They're stressed out. They're human. They're going to feel, potentially nervous or uneasy, whatever the scenario may be. And I think it's important to recognize that, right? They're human. Compassion, caring, just going a little bit above and beyond, and letting them know that they're not alone. You're there to support them is a huge factor.
Yeah, I want to add on to that. We really focus on some of the human aspects of this whole thing, which is super important. But I do think along that line is when there's stressful situations, it's often I've found a correlation that during deadlines, people get stressed, computers get stressed. We're like, here's an example. We're in we have customers who are in EDA semiconductors, and there's a period of they have called tape out, which basically says we have to get our design to the manufacturer by this date, and then all the computers are running in full mode, and the whole, it's like it's just a very, people are stressed, deadlines and so forth, and so stuff that happens, and I think that our ability as a company, even though we're a customer service company that has excellent technology, that excellence at technology makes a difference too, because we can say, oh, we can solve this fairly quickly, and let's total catastrophic. I can't think of a situation where we haven't collectively put our heads together and solve things faster than should be possible, or typically possible. And so there's a good combination of that that the people like Beth have. It's a good blend, and it's not an easy feat because technology changes every day, every week, so how do we keep up with that? It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it is. For people that are listening, this is a question to both of you. Beth, I'll put it to you first. And if there's people listening who want to elevate their client experience, iuvo has an NPS score of 91, which is just kind of incredible. Not even just for the industry, but just in the business world, period. So I think there's something to what we're doing and that people could learn from here. And so if you had a piece of advice on what someone could do to start elevating their client experiences, where do you think they should start?
I would say a good place to start would be to, understand the bigger picture. What are you looking to accomplish? What are you looking to solve? In order to have a destination, you need to know what you're going towards, right? So I would say if you need to take a step back and understand what the goal is, what you're trying to solve or improve, that's a big piece. And then from there, have an understanding of the foundational pieces. You have to start somewhere. So whether you're looking at maybe completely redoing or largely redoing or just making small changes, you have to have a starting point. So it can be overwhelming, and that's definitely understandable, but little steps amount to big progress. So I think it's important just to keep that that mindset, keep it in perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think too about if you haven't done it already for your business, mapping out your customer journey, I think is really helpful in being able to do this, because having a very clear understanding of what that journey looks like for your clients from the moment they're searching for your services to when they become a client to then their life with you as a client. I think that could help highlight any areas that maybe you have gaps that you could, work on. So I think that speaks to what you were talking about, Beth, of this like zooming out and getting a clear picture of where you are right now, and then looking for those areas of opportunity, and then making sure that the team is all, on board, and that they have the training and the tools to be empowered to deliver, would be another, I think, key piece for people to look at.
Yeah, I'll add to both excellent things you've added here. I will say, as a shameless plug, there's a book called Leadership at the Edge, and it describes some of the elements of it. But if I take a step out back, what you're saying is that there's got to be a good foundation of culture, and based on, we use core values significantly because we all agree with these core values, and just as important is for people to understand why we're doing things. Beth, why are you doing this? Or Bryon, why are you doing it? And when you understand why people are doing this, then you go, oh, I see. We could get together and do this. So there's not I think it's a culture of trying to understand each other, and not only, and what we're doing together. So we're all kind of aligned. And I've seen this, I've done it wrong on many times. And so now we're, kind of elements are going right again, but I think not again, but we're just like a kind of clarity of how this works. So I think, this foundation that Beth has a bigger picture of how this is going to work in the long run. It takes a lot of effort and get everybody aligned, and everybody has a voice. So you're all empowered. So I think it's a bunch of that, but you both said it much more eloquently than I did, actually.
But I think you had said something important there too, Bryon, where it's okay to not get it right the first time. I think that these things take time. To become world-class in anything takes a lot of time and dedication and conscious thought and practice. And so that applies to this as well. Delivering that world-class customer service, there's so many components to it. But if your team isn't happy at the end of the day, if you don't have a good culture to support your team, that's going to show to the client, like you said, Beth. And then beyond that, having a system of expectations, making sure that you have the level of expertise required to deliver what you're saying you're going to deliver is another, I think, key component. So we have like the highest, I think, expert density in the industry. Like we're very fortunate in that way, but it's also very intentional based on the people that you've hired here. And so you can feel confident as a client to know that we have the level of expertise to solve whatever issues, may come, to the surface. And I think for businesses that maybe aren't doing that, whether it's cutting corners, trying to hire young, because obviously that's, a smaller salary or whatever, there's an impact to that because those people are not going to be fully equipped or supported in a way if they don't have the level of expertise in other roles to be able to do that. And so I think there's a lot of different moving parts when it comes to being able to deliver this level of customer service.
Well, Jess, you mentioned, this phrase a few times, world-class customer service. Mm-hmm. And I will just, point out that you've kind of put a framework. You talked about the customer journey and you're leading an effort in the company right now that's going to be world-class customer experience.
Yeah.
Customer, like from end to end, from the moment we touch them to the time we that they're happily getting our invoices or whatever, like it's just all the way to the end. So it's paying attention to all those little things, and each delivering technical service, or if you're a elevator company and your elevator is always running on time, or it doesn't matter what it is like every step of that, everybody you touch has something about it. So it takes a focus on that. And I think not only a focus, but a collaboration amongst everybody. You can't know if it can't be just like if it was just my idea, it wouldn't happen. It has to be, everybody has to be in on this. And I think that's something that you kind of touched on here, that you can do that. And it's a communication amongst yourselves. And then when you actually do it, like Beth does, day to day is delivering on that promise that we've promised them.
Yeah. I mean, it has to matter to you at the end of the day too. It's one thing to say, yeah, I'd love to achieve world-class customer service. It's another to really want it and for it to be important and for it to matter to you, because if it matters, you're going to look at all those little details. Like you mentioned, Bryon, you're going to be hiring people like Beth that have these skills that they bring to the table. Not only is she an expert technically, but she has the people skills. So it's like you're looking for people in the interview process that can meet both of those needs. Whatever industry that you're in is going to be important. But if it doesn't matter to you, it will fall off because it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work to deliver this. Everything that Beth, you've been describing is a lot of work. It's a lot more work than just receiving a ticket, calling it what it is, solving it or not solving it. But the fact that you're putting so much effort into building these relationships and all of the communication that you do with clients on top of just the standard that you hold yourself to and your team to is a lot of work, but you do it because it matters to you. And then therefore the client is on the receiving end of, all the goodness that comes from that.
Oh, definitely. Thank you. And yes, I would agree in the sense of, right, there's the passion behind it. And I think I speak for everybody within iuvo that they have that, that drive, that passion, that desire to see, not only the internal team succeed, but also customers succeed. It's definitely an awesome thing.
So I can't believe that I feel like the time has flown. We're like approaching end of time for our episode for today. So I want to leave the floor open for any last thoughts before I ask my final question to Beth. All right. So Beth, we like to ask this question to all first-time guests on the podcast. Can you share a fun fact about yourself that might surprise people?
Ooh, that's a good one. Let me think here. I would say folks may not know that I've gone skydiving before, which was such an awesome experience.
Really?
I don't know if I would go and do that again, but it was definitely fun.
Wow.
I'm just going to ask if you would do it again.
Was that recent or younger, or when was that?
Oh gosh, this was a while ago. But it kind of goes with, the pushing your boundaries with being comfortable. That by no means is something that made me feel comfortable, but the feeling afterwards was incredible. And I would say to a degree, I try to apply that just in, current day-to-day life, like kind of push yourself, get out of your comfort zone, and it makes a difference.
That is cool. It's something I think about as a cool experience. I don't know that I could bring myself out of the plane though. So that is so cool that you did that.
Yeah.
That
awesome.
did surprise me. I would not have pegged that for you. That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Today's conversation reminds us that world-class service is universal. It's about empathy, predictability, clarity, and culture. It's the human experience behind the work, no matter what industry that we are in. If you'd like to learn more about how iuvo helps organizations through transformative IT consulting, visit iuvotech.com. You'll also find this episode along with past and future conversations available there.
Yes, and thank you, Beth, for being our awesome guest today. And thank you, everybody else, for listening. Until next time, keep showing up with intention, empathy, and excellence, because clients remember how you made them feel long after the work is done.
Thank you for tuning in to The Edge of Excellence. We hope today's insights empower you to shape your future and rise to your full potential. Let's continue to grow, innovate, and lead, pushing the boundaries of excellence.